Welcome to Self Wellness.
Do we have a fun one for you guys today? They don't want you to see this. Dogs cut open, drugged, caged on Hello Kitty blankets, funded by yours and my tax dollars. But thanks to relentless investigation, the Pentagon just admitted it, millions and millions poured into secret dog and cat labs where innocent animals were disposable test subjects. They told us it was for science, but the real science is corruption and cruelty. Now, while one horror show is exposed, another one begins. Canada is quietly beginning to spray mRNA into their air in a vaccination of aerosols designed to bypass your consent and your needle hesitancy. Not choice, just breath. And it's inside you. They say it's for your health. But who decides what you inhale? Today, I'm going to be joined by Justin Goodman, Senior VP at White Coat Waste, the man who helped uncover this Pentagon lab scandal. And then later in the show, we'll be bringing in Tracy Slepcevic. She's the warrior mom and fearless truth teller exposing the Aerovax agenda. Together, we will connect the dots from mutilated animals in military labs to invisible gene therapy that is being sprayed through a public airspace. The pattern is clear: control, concealment, and diabolical disregard for human freedom. This is Maha with Mike, where we set the points clear and fear will not be an option. We will expose the truth. Justin Goodman, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Man, those poor little god dogs, man, getting sliced up on Hello Kitty blankets. Who knows what they were doing? Were they doing vaccine therapy? Were they looking at side effects of Laetrile? Trying to see if they could make dogs live 177 years, or quite possibly, were they giving those dogs the weight loss drug Ozempic and seeing the side effects to see if the weight loss could be injected into pets now that we're rejecting it?
Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't realize the U.S. government is the single largest funder of animal testing, not only in the country, but the world. NIH, certainly under Fauci, it exploded, but NIH is the single largest funder in this country in terms of federal agencies. $18 billion a year being wasted just by the NIH on animal testing. And then, as you mentioned, the Pentagon, CDC, FDA, EPA are also wasting millions and billions of tax dollars on these animal experiments. And if you look at the NIH budget over the last 25 years, it's doubled. Human health is worse. Chronic disease is worse in this country. Animal testing is bad science, but it's big business. That's why it continues. It's funny you joked about putting dogs on Ozempic. Right now, National Institutes of Health is funding tests of an experimental weight loss drug on dogs by a company funded and co-founded by Moderna's billionaire co-founder. So we're still bankrolling billionaires' pharmaceutical companies with our tax dollars. And for silly stuff like a new weight loss drug, but also to develop new vaccines. There's experiments on dogs happening all over this country right now, being funded by the National Institutes of Health that are funding vaccine research, testing of experimental drugs. And these tests on dogs, like the ones you're going to show your viewers right now, these are experiments, routine experiments by pharmaceutical companies funded with our tax dollars, where dogs have masks strapped to their face, force them to inhale experimental drugs, have tubes forced down their throats. These photos are from a lab in China that was being funded with U.S. tax dollars, where they were doing these experimental drug tests on beagles. And specifically, the grant documents that we got through the Freedom of Information Act show that the NIH-funded laboratory in China specifically chose beagles because they're docile, sweet, friendly, small, and basically because they're easy to abuse. All the same great traits that make beagles great pets also make them, unfortunately, great victims for animal experimenters. And it's all happening at taxpayers' expense, which is why our organization, White Coat Waste, is dedicated to getting the government out of the animal testing business. The public doesn't like this stuff. They don't want it. They don't need it. It's incredibly wasteful, incredibly ineffective. And, our claim to fame as an organization is we first exposed Fauci's funding for the Wuhan lab in April of 2020. That's the worst case scenario when it comes to animal testing. Going in the wild, collecting wild viruses, bringing them into a lab, manipulating them to make them more contagious, more deadly, and then either intentionally or accidentally unleashing them on the public and killing 25 million people. So the NIH, unfortunately, hasn't learned its lesson. We're seeing great progress at the Pentagon, but the NIH is still funding animal testing, not only across the country, but around the world. So we're hoping RFK will take steps to crack down. We're disappointed that there hasn't been more progress at NIH yet, but RFK has been a long time supporter of white coat waste. Specifically, our campaigns to expose Fauci and end Fauci's Beagle testing were included in the Real Anthony Fauci, RFK's book that came out a few years ago. And he's been a great proponent amplifying our messaging on Fauci's Beagle tests to develop vaccines and new drugs. He's been sharing that stuff for years. So we are very optimistic that under this administration, we're going to make some progress to save kittens and puppies, save some tax dollars, and hopefully prevent another lab-caused pandemic.
Yeah, especially considering that, dogs and cats are so precious. And if Nancy Pelosi is still alive, I don't know why she doesn't just volunteer to do some of these testings. I mean, she could use a couple extra $100 million, and it would be a good way for her to add some stocks to her portfolios of which ones work and which ones don't. And maybe before they go public, she can invest in them. That's nothing new under the sun. But, there are some good things that NIH does do. NIH recently funded a $1.8 million project to see if koalas could see themselves in the mirror. And, koalas deserve a little bit of self-reflection.
That's right. Certainly animal experimentation ranges from the sadistic torturing puppies in China to the silly koalas looking in mirrors. We've exposed experiments like working with Rand Paul for his waste book, his Festivus waste book every year, putting fish on treadmills. Basically all of Noah's Ark has been on a taxpayer-funded treadmill at some point. And the worst of those are, we've exposed experiments funded by the NIH and other agencies where they give puppies heart attacks by injecting latex into their arteries and then force them to run on treadmills. So some of certainly the treadmill experiments are, silly and cute, and then some of them are just downright demonic. And we've been footing the bill for this for too long. The taxpayers are the largest funder of animal testing in this country. 2/3 of all animal testing is being funded by taxpayers when we know it's incredibly ineffective, incredibly wasteful, incredibly misleading, and helps dangerous drugs get to the marketplace that ultimately, in many cases, have killed people. So this is certainly an issue of corruption when you think about why are taxpayers funneling millions of dollars directly to pharmaceutical companies to torture dogs in experiments, to develop drugs that then these pharmaceutical companies, if they get approval, will patent and make billions of dollars off of, and taxpayers are never going to see a dime of that money. There might be some royalties sent to NIH employees, but then on top of paying for the R&D for these drugs, consumers are going to be forced to pay for that drug once it comes to market, even though if they paid to develop it. So there is certainly this horribly incestuous relationship that exists still between National Institutes of Health, Big Pharma, and all these government bureaucrats.
Now, Justin, I could talk about this all day. For my listeners, could you maybe dive a little bit, if you feel comfortable, could you dive a little bit into the biological and genetic differences, right? Like you're talking about a human being who has a completely different microbiome, a different gut biome, and a completely different brain, not only just a brain structure, but the brain and the synapses that it fires at. Why is animal testing even relevant? I mean, we already know it's inhumane, but can we talk about like how a drug response in a mouse is going to be completely different than your great grandfather, Tom, who's battling dementia?
Yeah, and that's why, that's a great point. And that's why you see, the waste word in our name comes from exactly that we are funding these experiments on animals that are completely irrelevant to human health. You can't even extrapolate what happens in a mouse to a rat, never mind from a mouse to a human being or a hamster to a human. And, one great example of how animals don't respond the same way to any substance than to humans is dogs and chocolate. Some humans would die for chocolate, and dogs do die from chocolate, right? So we know even just in our everyday lives that putting a substance in your body is going to react very differently, whether you're a dog, a cat, or a human being. Yet this is, like I said earlier, animal testing is bad science, but it's big business. There's $20 billion plus that are going out in tax dollars from the federal government to colleges and universities, pharmaceutical companies, companies that literally breed tens of thousands of beagle puppies and kittens every year just to be tortured in experiments, companies that breed monkeys. There's an island off the coast of South Carolina that Fauci funded for decades that still exists right now, where they hold 3,700 monkeys right off the coast of South Carolina in Nancy Mace's district. She's been fighting to end this. And they breed those monkeys on this island, and then they take a boat over there every year and take 600 of these 2-year-old monkeys off the island and send them to biological warfare biodefense laboratories run by the NIH and the DoD and infect them with things like Ebola and other hemorrhagic fevers, completely withhold pain relief, and just watch them as they suffer and die and bleed out of their eyes, their ears, their nose, and their mouths. These horrendously painful experiments without any pain relief at all. And it's all happening at taxpayers' expense.
That has to end because, the one thing that an animal can't do is an animal can't give consent. So during human trials, there's always those guys that sign their life away to try the experimental new drug. And that's usually how they come up with that tagline at the very end of the commercial: may cause diarrhea, bleeding, intestinal, suicidal thoughts, may cause actual suicidal actions and consequences. And I'm like, man, I was like, the last thing I want to do to get grandma's diabetes under control is give her something that would make her have suicidal thoughts and explosive bloody diarrhea. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the things that we take. But not only that, but the ethical review for animal suffering is so significant. And not only that, but in these animal models that are often used, they're considered like more expendable. And when you start looking at like cancers, you could literally give like a small dose of something to a mice that has a tumor and it might shrink it, but yet it has absolutely zero effect on the human body. So it's like people get so excited and they're like, oh, but in our mice trials, it's like, well, mice aren't humans. Bodies are much more complex.
That's right. And there's usually no follow-up. NIH, mainstream media constantly runs headlines about new breakthrough in laboratory shows, we can decrease the size of a tumor, we can cure cancer, we can fix Alzheimer's. Every single one of those things has failed in human beings. But it's a great revenue stream.
But Justin, what they don't follow up is did the mouse have a brain aneurysm 3 days later? Did it die? Did it spread? Did it get a different disease? They only tell you a little snippet. There's no follow up on, test subject 173. How was it doing 2 months, 3 months, and 4 months down the road? Did it stop eating? Did it stop breathing? Did it stop drinking water? And not only that, but when they do a lot of these controlled studies, they're not including things like lifestyle and environment. And not only that, but a lot of times they induce these diseases, like you mentioned earlier, in an artificial way that doesn't accurately reflect how they develop in human beings. So the animal trials are never, ever going to work because we're not animals.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they are, yes, to your point, these are a lot of these diseases animals don't suffer from, they don't get naturally, and they are inflicting animal versions of them in the laboratory that are really nothing like the real human disease, and certainly do not manifest in the same way as a result, to your point, of environmental and lifestyle factors. They're just given overnight, essentially, to these animals and expected to reflect the same thing. And that's why you see that 95% of the drugs and treatments that are developed and are quote unquote effective in animal tests fail in people, and they fail because either they don't work or because they're actually dangerous, even though animal tests said they were going to be safe. So it's incredibly ineffective and wasteful way. The return on investment for taxpayers is horrendous, and that's why our organization is dedicated to cutting off the spigot to these laboratories, the taxpayer-funded gravy train that has been going on for decades. Billions and billions of dollars being flushed down the toilet. The only people who benefit from torturing animals in laboratories are the ones lining their pocket with tax dollars. It's not improving human health. It's not saving lives. And we're seeing some progress. You know, the Department of Defense recently, following one of our investigations and work with people like Elon Musk and Laura Loomer, they completely canceled contracts for testing on dogs and cats that we had uncovered. Secretary John Phelan at the Navy under President Trump banned testing on dogs and cats after our investigation, and Secretary Pete Hegseth over at the Pentagon ordered the DoD Doge folks to review and cancel the contracts that they had for dog and cat testing. So we're seeing incredible progress overnight at some of these federal agencies. The DoD was funding experiments on dogs and cats in laboratories all around the world, unaccountable labs overseas where we have no idea what's being done to animals or how our tax dollars are being spent. So we're trying to replicate what Secretary Hegseth and others are doing at the DoD, bring that progress, keep that momentum up, and start making some of the same changes at these more entrenched federal agencies like the NIH.
Well, I'll tell you what, speaking of repurposed drugs that are saving lives, we're going to run to a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we've got a couple more minutes with you. I want to ask you what we can do to bring more attention and who we need to get in contact with congressionally to make sure that this ends in all 50 states. Hang in there, guys. You don't want to miss this. We're going to be right back. Hey guys, Maha Mike here. I've got some exciting news for you. Our new partners at Farm Easy Bank are leading the way in affordable, trustworthy healthcare, bringing an impressive lineup of generic medications at prices that your family can actually afford. Not only that, but they are now offering ivermectin and fenbendazole, two compounds that are gaining attention, and unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you've probably heard about their incredible benefits. You can trust every single order that you get from Farm Easy Bank. Why? Because they come from reputable, reliable sources, and their commitment to quality means you get the same effectiveness you'd expect from the big box store without the outrageous price tags. In fact, you can save up to 80%. That's right, 80% compared to traditional pharmacy prices. On top of that, they offer fast, discreet shipping to the comfort of your home. And the best part is, you can use the coupon code MAHA2025 for 20% off any order over $199. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Take control of you and your family's health today. And stock up, because you would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So go to Farm Easy Bank, that's PharmEasyBank.com/Maha and start your wellness journey with trusted support and serious savings.
Welcome to Vocal, the free speech social app that gives you a platform to amplify your voice. Speak freely, connect boldly, and be part of a growing movement for truth, faith, and freedom. Want to know what's happening right now? The Now Playing feature shows you exactly who's live and what's streaming in real time. Check out the show's feed, a non-stop lineup including Lindell TV News 24/7, shows and on-demand programming all in one place. Connect with your favorite host and never miss a show. Explore the featured page for quick access to Lindell TV's top shows. Follow your favorites and watch their newest content flow right into your feed. And when they go live on Vocal, you can join the live chat and be part of the action. Ask questions, share your thoughts, even help shape future shows. Stay informed on issues around securing our elections by following your state's Cause of America account. Join a group and connect on a deeper level, from faith and freedom to the future of our nation. Go to vocal.com or download the app today and be a part of the mission to save our country.
With everybody talking about making America healthy again, I thought today'd be a great day to talk to all my fellow patriots about the importance of making your homes healthy again. Well, we have proudly partnered with airwaterhealing.com and their revolutionary whole home air purification system. The V3 from Air Water Healing does 3,000 square feet of purification. It eliminates dust, mold, viruses, and odors. But here's the part I love. They require no filters to ever be changed and virtually no maintenance. Whether you suffer from asthma, allergies, seasonal bronchitis, or just want to protect your family from the flu or even greater threats, don't wait to get your V3 from airwaterhealing.com today. Use code Lindell for 20% off in savings and free shipping. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com.
So just before we went to the commercial break, we were talking with Justin about ways that we can end animal testing. So we're going to finish the segment with bringing him back on and asking him what kind of regulatory reforms can we demand of our politicians. And let me ask you this, Justin, like how can we start asking President Trump or Robert F. Kennedy to start encouraging these funds that are flowing into these animal laboratories and start doing like human cell-based models, right? Like organoids or organ-on-chip technologies, or even in silico models where we've got like, all this money that's going into AI, and we got machine learning and computer simulations that can be run on human tissues of, even if it's like a cadaver that donated their body to science. There has to be 1,000 ways that are way better than animal testing. What do you recommend, and what does your company recommend for our listeners? We have to make this a call to action. What can we do to help?
The most effective to end animal testing is to cut the funding, because right now there's no incentive to move away from it. These grants get funded sometimes literally 50 years in a row without having any outcomes that improve human health. The only way to force those people to do something else is to cut their funding. So our mission as an organization, our call to action for President Trump, for Secretary Kennedy, RFK Jr., is to cut funding for animal experimentation, cut funding for the colleges and the universities torturing animals, cut funding for pharmaceutical companies. Callie Means said in May at a speech at the Maha Institute that the NIH would stop funding pharmaceutical companies' R&D. Why should taxpayers be footing the bill for drug company dog torture? So that's a low-hanging fruit there. Stop funding R&D by pharmaceutical companies, and any R&D by pharmaceutical companies, especially testing that involves torturing dogs. So our call to action to the administration is stop the money, stop the madness, stop funding animal experimentation. If people want to visit our website, whitecoatwaste.org, they can join our mailing list where we send out calls to action regularly, and also follow us at whitecoatwaste on all the different social media platforms to get regular updates on the daily about what's happening in laboratories. And of course, there's my personal X account at Justin R. Goodman on X, where I'm every day just giving updates on our campaigns, new investigations, calling out leaders on Capitol Hill, asking them to take action. We're working with folks like DOJ Senate Chair Joni Ernst, Rand Paul, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, and so many great leaders in Congress who are leading the charge on these efforts. Congresswoman Nancy Mace has language in the DOD's spending bill this year to permanently cut funding for dog and cat testing. We're hoping to get that to the finish line and sign into law by President Trump by the end of this year, and make permanent the cuts that Pete Hegseth and John Phelan made at the Pentagon, and enshrine that in law that the DOD cannot waste our money shipping around to laboratories around the world to torture pets and experiments. And we want to replicate that across the federal government to the degree that we can. And this is the moment right now. We have leadership in the White House, at HHS, and RFK, and President Trump, who want to dramatically reform the public health system in this country, take Fauci's fingerprints off the NIH. And the way to do that is to defund and end all the programs that he set into motion.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys need to go to his website. You guys need to follow him on X. Let's write letters to our lawmakers, but more importantly, let's follow the money, right? You can't just assume that you're buying a cruelty-free brand and, all of a sudden you're doing the best thing that you possibly can do to stop the madness that you literally have sitting right there behind me. That's what came to my brain, was stop the madness. And we have to stand for those who don't have the ability to stand for themselves. These dogs and cats didn't sign up. They didn't ask to be born so they could be experimented on and have, blood pouring out of their eye sockets because of the pain that they're enduring and being, exposed to artificial heart attacks and experimental drugs and being injected with cancers and living a painful, miserable, gruesome life. They don't deserve that. Their consolation prize is not a Hello Kitty. We must strip the funds from every person who is inhumane. It is ungodly. It is unchristian. It is unethical. So, Justin, we stand with you. We stand beside you. if there's anything else we can do, we will be more than happy to have you back on the show again. Let's figure out what we can do. If there's anything that you need exposed, you let us know. We've got lots of friends with big Twitter followers. So if you uncover something, let us know. We will pass it. We will post it. We'll retweet it. We'll reshare it until we get every single governor and every single politician and every single lawmaker so pissed that they're getting so many letters from people flooding their mailboxes saying, stop animal testing, stop funding criminals, stop destroying Beagle's DNA. I always think about all that Beagle expose. Was that your guys' group that exposed what was going on with the Beagles?
Yeah. Back in 2021, we exposed Fauci's funding for that now infamous laboratory where the two Beagles had their heads trapped in those mesh cages and were being eaten alive by biting flies. And it turned out not only did they lie about funding it, they absolutely funded that lab, but they were also funding laboratories like it in other foreign countries and across this country. And a lot of the funding that Fauci signed off on for beagle testing, for kitten testing, for primate testing, and other animal labs is still active right now under the current NIH. So we really need to lean on the NIH hard, on Jay Bhattacharya, on his deputy, Nicole Klein-Stroyer, who's kind of the animal testing czar, to cut funding for these existing grants. The Trump administration, DOGE, has been very aggressive in cutting grants at different federal agencies, including the NIH. And courts have, fortunately, been now upholding those cuts despite lower court challenges from colleges and universities, challenges from the people getting rich off torturing animals. So we need the NIH not only to prohibit new funding for animal testing, but to go back and void all of the grants and contracts that Fauci signed off on for 40 years, many of which, billions of dollars worth, are still active right now.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I am going to pray for your efforts, right? I am going to absolutely consider that there is a great chance that a miracle can happen. But you and I, guys like you and I, we're realists. And when Jeffrey Epstein is living with a new plastic surgery nose and he's in Sweden living up in a mansion, remembering all of the children that he raped and all of the politicians who had handlers from foreign governments who also were raped, and they were drinking adrenochrome and going around the world torturing children on private jets. We haven't even funded the research to be able to bring those people to justice. So I will continue to pray, because the only thing that is promised is eternal salvation through Jesus Christ. And if we have the faith of a mustard seed and we tell a mountain to jump into the ocean, it will, brother. So I will continue to pray for everything that you guys are doing at your company and your corporation, but you and I have seen it. From children to beagles to mice, we are torturing innocent souls in this country. And I think that it's great that you're exposing that this isn't happening in some third world country. It's happening right in our back door.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate your support, and hopefully we'll have some more victories to report very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be bringing in Tracy Slepcevic, the warrior mom, a woman that I would not want to get in front of when she is mad. We will be right back.
Let's face it, you can't trust Big Pharma. They've already tried to block ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and raise prices on everything from antibiotics to your daily meds. Well, there's good news. All Family Pharmacy is standing up for medical freedom and helping people get the treatments they actually want. My family and I use them all the time. They made it easy and affordable without the runaround. While other pharmacies are jacking up prices, they've actually dropped theirs. Ivermectin now starts at just $2 a capsule. Use my promo code Lindell10, you get an extra 10% off of that. You need ivermectin, antibiotics, or methylene blue, you name it, they've got it. They make it simple. You fill out a short online form, a licensed doctor reviews it, and your meds ship fast right to your front door. If you want to be prepared and have your medications on hand, this is your new pharmacy. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/Lindell. Promo code Lindell10 saves you even more. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Lindell. Promo code Lindell10.
Well, guys, that was a little scary segment there, thinking about what could be possibly happening to the cats, the dogs. Can you imagine if your family pet just absolutely goes missing and now you've got to be worried about whether it's being trapped at some laboratory and experimented? It's absolutely horrible. Well, guys, it was worth the wait. And now we're going to be diving into not only what's happening up in our neighborhood to the north, but while the world's attention is locked into one horror show, another one is unfolding in silence. Canada. Yes, Canada. Our neighbors to the north are quietly preparing something unprecedented. Not in your food, not in your water, but in your air. They call it aerosol vaccination, a way to deliver mRNA technology directly into your lungs. No needle, no appointment, and apparently no consent. Just breathe, and it's inside you. They say it's for your health, like they always do, but who decides what you inhale? What else rides on those invisible particles? This isn't science fiction. This is not a movie. It's happening. And the silence around it, that's the loudest warning of them all. Because when medicine is no longer required to ask of your permission, it stops being medicine. Tracy Slepcevic, Warrior Mom, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing good. And if you talk to your husband, tell him that I'm so sorry. We got very busy last week and he got busy. And I was doing a huge chiropractic show and talking to 2,275 chiropractors about the importance of gut health and air quality. And I think your man was kicking butt, taking names with Charlie Kirk on stage at some show.
He was. He's back home now. And before that, he was in Israel, as you probably know. I'm sure you guys will talk more about that on Wednesday.
Perfect. Okay. Well, talk to us a little bit about how scary this is, because, you know, I remember when I covered a story with Stu Peters a couple years ago, and there was some really weird experiment that was happening in the New York subways. There was like some mist. It was a mist that thousands and thousands of New Yorkers were reporting seeing coming from the ventilation systems. They were spraying. And this is right around the time that the COVID vaccine mandates were still full in effect. They were still wearing masks. And I remember that Stu Peters and I toyed around the idea, what if they're experimenting, vaccinating people unknowingly? You walk into the grocery store and you think that you're just seeing mist being sprayed on your produce, right? But what if it's something more diabolical?
You know, a lot of people also talk about a fog, right? That they saw a fog, and a lot of people got sick. My nurse practitioner that I work with, her husband experienced that fog and passed away soon after. And so she kind of connects the fog and whatever was going on with that. But there's many ways, and this isn't the first time that the world is trying to roll out an aerosol. It began many years ago. Russia and South America did measles vaccine in an aerosol spray. And because of the health effects and people getting sick. So first of all, you can't control the dosage. And, not that I'm pro-vaccine by any means, as you know, but you can't control the dosage. Things are a lot different when your eyes absorb things or your lungs absorb them. So a lot of people think that by putting on a mask, it's protecting them, but it is not. Your eyes absorb that as well. So it's entering through so many different avenues that could make you sick. It could create scar tissue on the lungs. And that doesn't even, count the plethora of issues that the mRNA itself causes. So this isn't the first time, but it was immediately stopped years ago because so many people were getting sick and dying from the measles aerosol in South America and Russia.
Not only that, but let's think about, the mucosal immune system is so much more complex, and it's not as researched as traditional microbiome gut availability or injecting into, the fat soluble, part of your arm. I remember that lie when they were told that the mRNA technology will not travel. It'll stay right there. It's going to stay right in the injection site. And before you knew it, it was spread all over the entire body. So let's also take into consideration that, breathing something, you're absolutely right, Tracy. It's not the same as traditional. And it's not that we're saying that other vaccines are safe, but my cup of tea is environmental hazards and air pollution. So you also have to worry what else could be in the air that now, if it combines with said drug, you're breathing directly into your lungs, which can get into your bloodstream. And the other most important part that you brought up is you can't control the dosage.
Yeah. You also can't control where it goes. So the wind blows, and who's to say that us here in the United States will not be affected? So you cannot control the environment. So you talk about environment, right? So you can't control where it goes. Then you have those organic crops that are no longer organic. And then you have those people that, first of all, there is no informed consent. You have so many people that do not listen to the media, that do not watch the news, so on and so forth. So they don't know what's coming out. I'm usually one of them. So back in the day when I was very programmed in the military to get your vaccines on a regular basis, I never watched the news or saw what was going on as I was vaccinating my child, which led to a vaccine injury. And it's so crazy, Mike, because the other day I actually found my vaccine records from when I was in the military. And in 2 short years, the first 2 years that I was in of my 4 years in the Air Force, I received 17 vaccines. And that did not include my annual flu shots, because I do remember getting annual flu shots and getting very sick from them. So, you can probably bump that up to 21 vaccines in my time in the military. So all of this is just, it's so crazy. There's no informed consent. People, they don't care. Big pharma, so aerosols in the air is a cheaper, faster, and more scalable way for them to vaccinate, right? So, of course, big pharma is going to look to make more money, and they're going to look for cheaper methods. The government's going to pay for it, and then you're gonna start having people that'll have lung issues and a plethora of issues. Because if we're talking that people were dropping dead from a fog, and we know that was some sort of aerosol. It wasn't just a mist, right? It had a color to it, and it was kind of a bluish fog. And then people were getting really sick if they were in this area where there was this fog. So we know that somewhere, somehow, this was being sprayed. So I truly feel that it's already been done to us. And, they put things in our water. So they say that the mRNA has been, our water's been poisoned with, the snake venom and all the different things the avenues that they're trying to get in our bodies. And as September rolls around and more people are anxious to hear from Bobby Kennedy and what he has to say about vaccines and autism, the Dems are they're going crazy. They gotta be their heads are spinning.
Well, because it's going to expose not only the damage that's been done, but it's going to expose a lot of the lies. I do want to go circle back just for a second and ask you your thoughts on this, because I know during COVID, one of the biggest things that we talked about was the potential for vaccine shedding. So are we not running a risk of not only, and I'm not just talking about a theoretical concern, I'm talking about the risk of mutagenesis or transmission itself. If you have a live attenuated virus, right, that's being used in an aerosol form, one, if it's not being stored properly, you have the risk of mutation. But more importantly, what if one of the canisters explodes? or is slowly leaking, and you have somebody who has COPD or somebody with an autoimmune disease or someone that was recently vaccinated with the same exact thing, and now they're double downing. So there could be a potential for shedding unintentionally and having people exposed to this virus. This is another danger that we're not even sure long-term storage and stability issues of putting I imagine this being in like a almost like a Lysol pressurized metal can that they hook up to a machine that you know inhale, and they have you do like a nebulizing treatment. Come on in, guys, no needles, this is safe, let's go ahead and let's just breathe it. Before you know it, they're vaccinating football stadiums.
They're the invasive way of, giving a child a vaccine, which it's crazy, the thought of how they can do it. They can do it so many different ways. They've already poisoned us with food, and then they go after our air and our water. And, let's go back to polio. Polio, we were starting to eradicate polio back in the day by cleaning up the water system. So polio was in the water, and that was making people sick. So when they started to clean up the water system, people started to get better, and the numbers of polio started to go down. But then they decided to create a vaccine. And then people think, oh my gosh, the polio vaccine saved so many lives back then. And I'm like, no, you're absolutely wrong. Your local plumber saved lives back then. The polio vaccine took lives. First of all, it was full of SV40, semivirus 40, which is a carcinogenic material. So how many people got cancer from that rollout? And then so many people died, and over 200 people were paralyzed from that in the first month. And that's only what was recorded. And then, as we know, polio is called so many different things now. You can call it MS, you can call it ALS, any debilitating disorder or disease, you can pretty much relate it to polio. So I feel the same thing is kind of happening. So before it was in the water, now they want to take the air that we breathe and leave it to Canada. Of course, Canada will do it first, because Bobby and Trump are not allowing any of that to happen here in the US. And so many things are happening, which is so wonderful, especially for these parents, because I, on a daily basis, get so many calls and emails from parents. What do? I don't want to vaccinate my child, but I need my child to go to school. And I understand getting a little bit of a reprieve by putting your child in school, especially when you have an autistic child. And then they should be able to get a free and public education. That should be their right. That is their God-given American right. And we can't, because they're forced to vaccinate. But now so many cases are being won on religious exemptions, and now we're tapping into the medical exemptions, and that's going to set a precedent for across the board for parents to argue in regards to sending their kid to school and getting the religious exemption back, at least the religious exemption. I'm not sure about medical exemption, because they keep going after doctors for medical exemptions. They keep slapping them on the wrist, or even worse, taking their licenses for issuing medical exemptions. So all these different things, as a parent, as an advocate, we just need to speak out. Everybody needs to know about this. You don't have to write a book or speak on a stage to be an advocate. Just talk to your neighbor, talk to a parent with a newborn baby. And the more people that know, the more awareness that there is, the more we'll be able to fight back, because then our numbers start to grow. Because look at the numbers right now, Mike. If you look at it, the numbers of families who have stopped vaccinating their children has grown substantially, right? It is climbing. Parents are pulling their kids out of school if it is mandated. And so now what do the states do, especially California? I'm in the worst one. They go after the parents. They're going after the charter schools and the Christian schools, because they don't require vaccines. So we have to stand up. There's so many of us out there. It isn't just me or my organization creating awareness. There's so many organizations out there. In California, I work very closely with Informed Policy Advocates, Voice for Choice Advocacy. They are fighting those bills like crazy. Go to your capital, whatever state you're in, especially if you're in New York or California, make sure you show up. Make sure your voice is heard, because I remember that first rally that I went to. Steve came home from a trip, and I looked at him and I'm like, honey, I don't want to be like one of those protesters or anything, but I'm feeling that I really should be up there and be one of those protesters, and be a voice.
Yes, you should.
And
you have been. You've become a warrior. You've become one of the loudest voices in the movement because you saw something happen to your precious baby that was not supposed to happen, which is why I would love to ask you this question. You know my stance on vaccines, okay? But here I am thinking about these poor beagles and these dogs and cats that were being abused by Anthony Fauci, right? An animal that obviously can't give consent. What do you think about the idea that instead of just eliminating every single process that a parent has to go through when they make decisions regarding their children's health, and I'm not talking about surgery, I'm not talking about falling off a bike, I'm not talking about a heart murmur or a life-saving treatment, but when it comes to vaccinations, do you think we should let children wait until the age where they can consent, where they're old enough to understand what a vaccine is, and say, hey, here's the insert for every injection we're going to give you. You're now old enough to understand this. Do you want to receive this? Because think about how many children out there are damaged for the rest of their lives because their parents weren't given an insert. They weren't warned about potential side effects.
So first of all, when I read The Real Anthony Fauci, I could no longer read it once I got to the beagle part, the flesh-eating flies. And oh my gosh, I have 2 dogs. I have 2 beautiful labs. I do not agree with the animal testing. I just don't. There are other ways, but yes, in regards to kids being old enough. So first of all, man, we got to educate. Because even my own son was very programmed in school. He went through a public school system because he had a medical exemption. He had an IEP to back it up. And I didn't have to worry about my son receiving vaccines in school. And he wanted to stay in school. So he fought me. After COVID, I did not want him to go back to school. And he's like, Mom, I want to go back to school. I want to be with my friends. And my mom always gave me the choice. So I wanted to give my son that choice as well. So I let him go back to school, only to have him so indoctrinated. And I love my kid. I love him with all my heart. He has got the biggest heart, almost to a fault, like his mom and dad. But man, he was so brainwashed. He is as liberal as they come. He does not believe anything that we believe, but I've made it very clear to him in regards to vaccines. So when the COVID shot first rolled out, me and Noah would have arguments about it. And he was like, well, my friends are getting it and I want to get it too. And I'm like, oh, no, you don't. But let me explain to you. Let me not just tell you no, right? I'm going to tell you, you have autoimmune issues. You have a genetic predisposition like MTHFR, mitochondrial disorder, that predispose you to vaccine entry. But on my case, and I'm going to state my case, all of his friends got vaccinated, right? All of his friends got COVID. And I asked Noah, I said, did you get COVID? And he's like, no. And I said, well, I rest my case. Isn't the whole idea is for you not to get COVID? So instead of sending you to get a vaccine, I sent you to get immune boosting IVs. Yes, a little more invasive than a shot. You had to get an IV once a month, once or twice a month. But my son is extremely immunocompromised. He is very much like me because I'm immunocompromised. If you take my childhood vaccines, which were a third of the dose of what Noah got, and you add the 21 vaccines that I got when I was in the military, and a lot of them pretty harsh doses, then, I'm plagued with all kinds of issues. And my poor son has all of those. So I said, listen, this is my case. Your body cannot fight off those infections, those viruses. You cannot get rid of all, your body does not filter out toxins like a normal person who doesn't have those genetic predispositions. So as I explained it to him, he's like, oh, okay, I get it, right? So we need to talk to our children, and we need to keep talking to our children, even if they don't want to listen. In a very loving way, you just talk to your children. And that's the best that we can do, because punishing them or just telling them no, it doesn't work. Because if you remember back in the day, when our parents told us no, we just wanted to do the opposite. So I want my son to know from a complete space of love that I have a major concern for his health and his well-being. But on another note, and I named this the last chapter in my book with my story, Let Go and Let God. At some point when your children become adults, and the adult age should be 18, not the choice to choose what to do with your body when you're 12 years old, like California has decided to do so. But at some point, you have to let go and let God take over, and they're on their own perfect journey. We're here to have an experience, and we can experience the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, until we fall on our face a few times. And when he falls on his face, then I'll help him back up. But at some point, I just trust that God has his back.
And, Tracy, one of the things that I want to ask you, and I don't know if you've ever had this hard conversation, with your friends, and, you know a lot of the same powerful people that I know. And, you and I have a couple friends that are in Congress and are trying their best to do the things that they're doing. But my question is to you, what percentage, or have you ever talked to your friends about what percentage of people will not be saved? And I'm not talking about introducing them to Jesus Christ and giving them everlasting life. I'm talking about, you and I know that there are some people and some families that without God's intervention, they will not listen to a word that you say or I say. You have a son who grew up in a house where you and your husband have very different ideologies. You have proof, you have science, you have the book, you kept the receipts. And yet someone like your son can go into a school and still be so swayed. I have seen it within my own family. I have seen the divide of people who drink the medical tea and they will not be fixed. Like, you and I both know that we could walk into a Kamala Harris rally and we are not going to walk out with one person to be a Trump fan. It is not going to happen. So when you have these people that are so far drinking off the government tea, when do we shift and focus on people who have not been indoctrinated yet? That's where the education, that's where people like Charlie Kirk, that's people like Forrest Frank who are bringing a new level of gospel, a new level of Jesus. There's more teens that listen to Christian music now than have ever listened in human history. Like, we are topping the billboards with Christian artists. So that's my question to you is, who do we focus on trying to educate? What's the best way to save people before they get indoctrinated?
Talk to the person sitting next to you on the plane, or in a restaurant, or talk to anybody. I talk to anybody. And the cool thing is if I see a family with a newborn child, I typically, for the most part, especially when I'm traveling, I carry my books on me. And I always carry extra books. I keep them in my car, whatever. And I'll take one out and I'll tell them, I wrote this book, and I wrote it for families and children. And if I gifted you this book, would you read it knowing that it could save your child's life someday? And I haven't had a parent tell me no yet. Some of them look at me a little puzzled, like, why would you just out of the open? Because there are no accidents why God puts you in front of somebody. There are no accidents why even so you said that there was a divide. My family was on the same page, except the fact that one of my nephews that I pretty much raised, who lived with us when Noah was vaccine injured, lived with us through his recovery, still chose to vaccinate his child. And I begged him not to. I said, please don't do that. But, he insisted. And of course, I think it was more his wife insisted. But nothing against her. That was her programming. And now they have an autistic child. And for a year or so, he didn't talk to me. He was afraid to call me and tell me my son has autism. Like I was going to say, I told you so. And I didn't. I came over with a big basket of gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free ingredients and, ways to heal your child, written, protocols. And I even scheduled him a visit with Dr. Jerry Cartznell. And Dr. Jerry's like, because he's your family, I'll gift it to him for free. That's an expensive visit. And he didn't even bother. And I'm like, wow, back in the day when Noah was first diagnosed, you couldn't get an appointment with Dr. Jerry because he was Jenny McCarthy's doctor. So everybody wanted an appointment with Dr. Jerry. And I'm like, just didn't bother. And I'm like, well, you're on your own perfect path. And I have to move on to the next parent, whether you're my family or not. And my niece, she did the same thing. Vaccinated herself, vaccinated her child, and then her child started slipping. And then after the first round of vaccines, my sister and her sister, my other niece, convinced her to stop. And then luckily her child was able to recover from that. And
well, praise God. Real quick, before we finish on that, because I don't want to get cut off, we have 30 seconds. We need your website and how to find you. How can we support you? 30 seconds, go.
So first off, we have a walk September 6th. There's a virtual walk, and we are walking in person at Huntington Beach. There's also a Virginia location, a Florida location, and a Utah location. Go to autismhealth, HEALTH.com for more information on the walk. And to support Autism Health, we also run a conference. Our conference is scheduled for next year, April 24th, 25th, here in San Diego. And that is also through autismhealth.com. And if you want any information on my book, you can go to warriormom.com or .org.
Awesome. Tracy Slepcevic, thank you so much for being the warrior mom that you are. We will continue to pray for you. We will blast this interview out everywhere. I will be at your conference next year. Air Water Healing will be there to support you guys. Last year we weren't. We had a lot of stuff going on, but now God is moving and we have to reach as many humans as possible with the good word that Jesus is the ultimate healer. And I thank you for coming on Maha with Mike, and tell your husband that I look forward to seeing him on Wednesday. God bless you, Noah, your family, and all of the vaccine injured children that are out there. And let's continue to pray for Bobby and continue to pray for Donald Trump. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Maha with Mike. Welcome to Self Wellness.